had a session last week, which was like a fucking barn burner. And then I like had the biggest like spiritual guest I've had on right after. And I actually fucking cried and on the podcast. And I never thought I would be that guy. I hate to say it because it feels like it was performative in retrospect. That's the judgment, but obviously it wasn't. It was just like, I was just from therapy and we're talking about some real shit.
Yeah,
and
man.
It was just there. But hey, everybody, my single listener out there, this is the Rebel Filmmaking Community, and I'm Sean Crampton, and the show's called Multi-Hyphenate. And here we have one of the baddest motherfucking multi-hyphenates I know, an incredible actor, an incredible writer, director, producer, you could call him, because he's produced quite a bit of his own material. He's a thespian at the highest form. My brother from another mother, sports fanatic, Devin Crittenden.
Yes, wow. I feel like I have to applaud for that. It's such a good intro.
Thanks.
Appreciate that, man.
Yeah. And you also, I don't know if you're still doing it, but like a soccer advising, like betting, you were running that for a minute too, right?
Yeah, it's still going. It's called the Soccer Sharps. It's a European soccer gambling podcast because we wanted to make it as niche as fucking possible to turn off as many people as we could. It's actually going pretty well. We have a decent listenership on that.
Oh, good for you, man.
This is a weird thing, but they were going to legalize gambling in California and then it failed. So I still go through my other means, but it'll be legalized throughout the states. I think in time. So
I mean, they're fucking advertising for it at the highest level. Like ESPN, who's owned by Disney, has motherfucking DraftKings on the UFC mat.
Yeah, definitely. It's and you can bet on anything. It's not even just sports. It's like you can bet on the Oscars. You can bet on who's going to win Best Picture and who's going to be Best Director, and they put up odds for them, which is really interesting. So
that's fun.
So you're like, okay, well, this is who the favorite is. They think this is who Las Vegas thinks is going to win, and they have the best research, statistical teams behind everything.
What do you think the research team's like? It's like a bunch of old dudes with green clear hats, like in a basement. Exactly. You're just hearing money tilling behind them for no reason. Like they shouldn't be in the same room, but yet they can't afford an office for some reason.
Well, yeah, when you go on a losing streak, it certainly feels like that's who you're up against. So it's but yeah, that's a hobby, it's more just a hobby than like a profession or anything. And I do the podcast with my brother, so it's just like a fun way to talk to him. Yeah,
this is a fun way for me to talk to my great friends and colleagues and peers, and I feel very similarly, and it's when I was talking to my
I mean, we've known each other for I'm sorry to cut you off there, but we've known each other almost since I had been in LA. I think I was 22 when we met. I'm 35 now, so 13 years. Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fucking long time, right?
Yeah.
That's almost my whole adult life, essentially.
Not to mention all the projects that we did in between. So it's not like we were just acquaintances.
Friends.
I mean,
no, we were on a improv
did our first
team.
feature together, improv team.
Yeah, for many
all kinds
years.
of stuff, man.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to share before we dive into what we're here for is, and I'm sure you know this, but what I'm about to say, but my friend Sam Valentine, who runs One Broke Actress podcast, dude, she's been doing it 6 years. And when she started, it was, like just starting. And now it's a paid SAG podcast where she makes a living off of it. And all she said was, you just got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. So I'm sure the more you keep doing it, because there are a lot of people out there who love what you love, they just got to find you. And that's it. 100%. That's the podcast today. All right, I'll see you later.
Yeah. Nailed it. Podcasting is really interesting because use like the heavyweights, right? Like Joe Rogan and like Bill Simmons and stuff. Like they started it when it like started, so they were really, in the ground floor there. Now anyone can make a podcast, so it's like up to you to just make it as interesting as you can. But it's and this is like content in a larger scale too. It's stuff on TikTok, it's stuff on streaming services. There's so much stuff out there for you to consume. As a consumer, as the viewer, like we can look at things endlessly, and you can be so precise about what you want that it's almost like, why would I ever go anywhere else? And so to be noticed in that sea of content can be really overwhelming, but also really empowering to say, like, actually the stakes are really low, because probably no one's going to watch anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, and that's why I'm trying to keep this casual and informal. Also, to set a precedent for people, part of my school is like, don't be a perfectionist. Do it dirty. Just get it started. Like, that's all. Just get it started. Whatever.
Oh yeah, nothing has held me back more than fear of my own shortcomings with all my work. Like, especially writing, because I'm just like, because it's never good on the first draft. Like, it's never good. If it's good, it's probably bad. And
because you're thinking it's good.
Yeah, exactly. So I look at, and it holds me back a lot, because I look at things and I'm like, fuck, man, I'm just not at the level I want to be. And I recognize it, and it's really daunting. So it's easy to throw up your hands and say, like, well, I guess I'm not going to do anything. Which sucks.
Yeah. What shifted for me with the first drafts was literally, and I still get caught up, of course, like wanting to be great right away. But I realized it was a function of like laziness. Like I was like, fuck, I want it to be good so I don't have to do this more. And then secondarily, because writing a draft is hard. The first draft takes weeks and weeks of prep, maybe months, maybe years. And then secondarily, the piece of like, this is just a placeholder for my thoughts in order. And then once I switched to that, it became a breeze, because I'm like, oh, I can write this shittily on purpose. Like, make this bad guy kitschy on purpose, knowing this is kind of like the ballpark of where I think it is. But yeah, so that really helped.
That's a good, I like that distinction a lot. Because when I plow through like first drafts, I'm just like, I'm just going to fucking write. And I have to remind myself, just go, stop looking back, stop trying to fix the scene. And hopefully, because you do a lot of outlining too. Hopefully you spent the time there, you spent the thought process there. So now you just need shit on a page, because it's fun. I think it's fun to go in and rewrite. I like that, because I can actually make something good. And then I can be concerned about that and say, like, oh, I want this scene to be good. Instead of at the beginning, if I am worried about it being good, I won't do it. It'll just sit there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I've realized in my outline phase too, I'm getting drafts out, because the way I like know I'm done with an outline is I throw in this 40-point beat sheet a few times. And I mean it when I say a few times, because, one of my outlines is 77 fucking pages. Now, is it, organized and formatted in a way that would be single space 77? No. There's pictures in there. There's big font to inspire me. I'll throw whatever the kitchen sink in there if it works. But as I get these beats done, by the time I'm writing like page-long beats, I'm like, okay, it's time to go in. But every beat has to be filled in at least a paragraph, so that I'm not really scrambling. And then I notice the actual writing of the script takes like 4 or 5 days.
Right. Oh, that's seems super efficient. Let me ask you this: when you have that outline that has pictures and bold and the different things, do you start a new document for the screenplay version, or the like more fleshed out outline? Like, do you have a separate document, or do you keep it in one? This is super like technical, weird thing, but like,
no, I keep it in one. It's a great question, but I basically do the final beat sheet, which is what I use when I'm pulling from, at the very bottom. So I'm not constantly like, where the fuck is this thing? Like, it's just like,
Right.
it's the
Yeah.
last thing I did. And the reason I keep redoing the beat sheets is for exactly the reason, like, one, I'm getting drafts out in a sense because I'm just rebeating it. I'm having to literally rewrite it. And sometimes in the literal transcription of it, you come up with a better or you redefine it easier and it gets clearer because you're having to literally like rehash it in a moment. And so it's usually the final version and it looks clean because it's just sitting at the bottom by itself.
That's I like that. That's good. That's how
Yeah.
I started approaching sketches. Like when I was doing a lot of sketches on my sketch team,
Mm.
and it was like a super competitive room. So like everyone would bring in like, I mean, some people were slackers, but most people bring in like 4 to 5 like fresh sketches per month. And there's 12 people on the team, so like we'd be
Holy
fucking reading
shit.
sketches, and you got to vote on them and figure out what you build the show from that. But that was the most efficient way was to for that I found for me was to like write my little like escalations, like intro, game beat 1, 2, 3. Maybe there's a twist, maybe there's a button, maybe there's some end, and then I just like write those things out and then slowly build from there. And it's like building each piece in that one document. And then like sketches, I mean, as you know, I mean, we did sketches for years. Like it's a great microcosm of like larger format stuff.
Yes.
Because it follows this general same storytelling structure, which is just like beginning, middle, end. But the way it functions is like that escalation and then sort of ending piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously it's more contained, but
well,
yeah.
I mean, Jordan Peele said he wrote that way for Get Out. He's like basically, I mean, obviously it's not a comedy, but he basically was like, "Oh, I realized like if I can write every scene as if it's a sketch, then I'll naturally do the A to Z, which is how I call it. Like your scene shouldn't start at A and end at A, or why the fuck are we watching it? It should
Right.
end. It should be at Z or A to begin with and go to the inverse to end with every scene, and that's fucking hard to do.
Yeah.
Like, and it doesn't mean
really hard,
tears at the end or laughter. It just means something should happen. And for
Right.
a long time, I didn't really understand that, but it's similar to sketch, right? You're setting it up and then you're twisting it.
Yeah, totally. And if it's not, we would talk a lot about like lateral beats where it's not enough of an escalation. Like nothing happens if like our funny idea, it has to escalate, because if it doesn't escalate, then we're just treading water and the audience is caught up to us. And you can never have that in comedy, or it's interesting you bring up Jordan Peele or horror. Yeah, because horror and comedy are actually like super linked.
Yeah,
More than
twin
people think.
flames or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
like it's like the music is the difference or something.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Because it's the same thing where you're just stretching out like time and surprising the audience at every turn. It's like
Yeah.
in comedy, why do we laugh? It's because we're surprised. You know, you have to be surprised in order to laugh. Like if you see it coming, you don't really laugh. You can appreciate it in your mind,
Yeah.
but you don't have that involuntary response,
Mm-hmm.
which is like the same with fear, right? Where you're like, holy shit, I don't know where I'm going. This is scary.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the same idea of like once you're surprised, you get elicit a reaction. So I always found that really, really fascinating. And that's why that's my favorite genre, right? Is like horror comedy. And I guess you wouldn't call Get Out horror comedy, but it's but yeah, knowing that he comes from that sketch background, I think
it makes sense. And it also makes sense why he's able to take bigger risks, because he's written through a lot of his cliche shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you have to kind of write through, just like you have to act through your stereotypical choices a bit to kind of understand like, oh yeah, that's a trap actually. You sort of have to get through those things. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, man. That's like when we did all the doors and activities at Playhouse West, which was it was good training. It was just fucking miserable to do.
Yeah, yeah.
But
We put a lot of pressure on ourselves for sure.
definitely that. But we would do these things and and I'd be like, oh, this is how I respond in this kind of situation, which gave you sort of like a vocabulary and like a history to remember when you approach a scene. You go, oh, this makes me kind of feel like that one time I was in that improvisational exercise. So maybe I'll behave like that.
Yeah.
And it ends up being like kind of a unique choice. So not that everything should be pre-planned. You get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right on. So we dove straight in. So
that was quick. Sorry.
That's all good. It's all good. I love it. It can go anywhere. No sorries necessary. So I wanted, almost every guest has had a story around their name in Hollywood. So I'm literally starting at the beginning. So, for one guest, for example, her last name was too foreign, so she was Americanizing it. Gabe Greer, William or Gabe, things like that. With a last name such as yours, which isn't hard once you know it. But was there ever a time where you're like, maybe I'll go by Devin Lee, or a stage name? So what was your story, if you have one, around that?
Yeah, I had a very brief consideration of like, my middle name's Lynch. I was like, should I be Devin Lynch? It sounds a little cleaner, maybe. Than Crittenden. It's like a lot of syllables. Devin Crittenden.
Yeah.
But ultimately,
I could see it being butchered in a casting office. Crittenden?
Yeah, people do that, and it just sounded out, man. It's really, it's really right there for you.
Yeah, I know, literally.
Yeah, so I consider that, and I was just like, no, it's fine. Crittenden's like a strong name, and it's unique. It's unique enough too. So I thought, well, that's probably good.
Yeah,
because Lynch, I was like, are they going to think I'm like David Lynch's kid or something? Like maybe that would have helped me. I should have done that.
Yeah, I know. Retrospect. One guy I had on here, he had to compete with somebody else already having his name in SAG. So that was an interesting story. It's like, he's like, no,
I've heard of people
my
like
fucking name.
And then
the middle initial.
The middle initial is one, or sometimes they'll put a Roman numeral based on their IMDb, because like once IMDb logs a name, and it's like a separate person, they give you a new Roman numeral.
Fucking IMDb.
So there's like David Lee the like 16th or something, you know. And then a friend of mine, he's like, I put that. That's my name now. It's like they gave me it. I thought that was interesting.
He's been knighted by IMDb. Okay, so you're from
we can all aspire to.
All of us. So you're from Arizona.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how art found you in Arizona? Like, how did it come to you?
Sure. Well, I mean, I was born outside of Boston. My family moved to Scottsdale, Phoenix, Arizona when I was 1. I was a real sensitive kid. So I had I didn't know at the time, but I had a artistic soul, poetic soul, you might say. Because I was just moved deeply all the time. Like my teachers held me back a year in school because they were like, look, his feelings are too close to the surface, is what they said.
Interesting.
Which is like, oh, okay. At the time I was like, oh, I don't know anything about this, but I guess I'm going to feel shame about it because that seems to be the thing. And then
it's different.
I mean, from my work, man, like I have a strong access to my feelings. And that would come up in ways like if I got in trouble in school or like being picked on or like, things happen. And then I have this like emotional response, which just leads to more ridicule and also a weird side effect of people wanting to fix all the time. So like if you see, especially a boy crying, the initial reaction is like, oh, how do we stop? Are you okay? Are you okay? And it's like an unwanted attention. And I remember this being a kid a lot, like very clearly, is thinking, just like fucking leave me alone. Like I just like let me be alone.
Yeah.
And I had a very clear moment when I think I was going into middle school, and I remember thinking to myself, I can't do this anymore. And I cut it off. I like cut it off and I changed who I was completely. And I started playing basketball and listening to really hardcore rap and hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like an asshole, honestly. Bit of a bully, but still needing to be liked, desperate to be liked.
Same.
So it's a weird combination, but it was a choice that I made at that point. I was very young.
Yeah, survival.
Yeah, had to do it to survive at that time. And like through work, I've unraveled this over the years and realized like it's an unhealthy pattern, but it was a necessary one at the time. And I mean, Phoenix, Arizona is not exactly like a woke liberal place. Like it's a pretty conservative Christian, religious place. Very traditional values, you could say.
Desert folk.
Desert folk, yeah. So people that weren't, let's just say, like very open-minded about things, and that's a generalization, of course, and it's changed a lot. You know, I haven't been there and lived there for 15 years. So you were asking about art. So I had always been a bit of a clown. I've been a bit of a performer. Like I won the Toastmasters in middle school, which was like a speech giving contest thing.
Cool.
So I like gave a speech, but I was always comfortable in front of crowds. And I would kind of mess around in theater class. Like theater class was fun because it was just a time to fuck around and be funny, which I liked too. I like making people laugh. And then I get into high school, and I have two older brothers. I'm the youngest of three boys. Two older brothers, they were involved in theater somewhat, and they did some school plays, and so they talked about it, and it was kind of around our house, so I kind of knew about that. And you had to take an art class in high school, so you could either take visual arts, performing arts, or like choir, and or band, some kind of music. And so I went with performing arts because I didn't do music, and I certainly have never really been a visual artist. And so I would do theater classes. And again, it was just like fun to mess around. And I auditioned for plays, but I was still playing basketball at the time. That was like kind of my main focus. That's where my friend group was. And then I started getting hurt a lot, sprained my ankles dozens and dozens of times.
Damn,
horrible feeling. Yeah. And then I broke my leg for the first time playing in a summer game, and I never really like recovered my form like as a player. And so when I had a tryout for the basketball team, I was a junior and all my friends were on the varsity team, and they put me on the junior varsity team. And I was like, and they were kind of like, yeah, like you're just not in form, like maybe you can like play the season with them, and then if we like make the playoff run or whatever, you can come up to the other team. And I was like, I don't like any of that.
Yeah.
I don't like the sound of that. So
hard to deal with.
Yeah. So I was like, screw this. So I stopped playing basketball. And then I got into some trouble, had an altercation with like a teacher, and then I was like suspended from school. And then I started drinking because I had a lot of angst, a lot of big feelings that weren't being dealt with. And just like a lot of just like tumult about things that weren't that big of deals, but it's high school. You're a teenager, so you think
you have
things
no
are important.
Reference though.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
And I didn't have, my oldest brother, and I had been struggling with this, and as the time you knew me, it was still going on, was a drug addict, did heroin and like stole from our family. And he was like my hero growing up. Like he was my oldest brother, was like the coolest guy I could imagine, but here he was just like strung out, and like, he's better now. He's fine. He survived.
That's good.
But there was a lot going on. And so I started drinking a lot and partying, and then I decided to drive one night to get pulled over. And I get arrested for fucking DUI. I'm 17 years old, man. It's like, and I remember talking to the judge.
Must have been scary.
Well, it was very scary for my parents. You know, they were like, "Holy shit! Like, what's going on here? Like, we already have this one son who's got this going on, and now you." Because I don't think they fully saw what I was dealing with.
How could they?
Or how I was coping.
Yeah. Parents don't understand when they have a problem child, they're looking this way.
Yeah.
They're creating more problems because they're ignoring the rest of their children.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be that harsh on them, but I guess you could make that argument. I mean, it's hard to even remember the details of that stuff.
I'm generalizing. I see it on like my men's team and stuff too. I'm not necessarily talking about your situation, but it's almost an impossibility, right? You're triaging a fire. Well, nothing's for free. Literally, like time spent here is time away here. So
yeah. And then, I mean, you look at, you know, as a parent, I imagine it's hard. It's like, well, you know, we've got this son who's like fucking up and we can't help him because he's on drugs. And what does that mean about us? Like, are we bad parents? And like, there's like a whole psychology that goes on with your children. So I understand that. But so I'm in this position where now it's like, boy, like I don't have basketball anymore. I've been suspended from school. I've been arrested now with a charge that's like no fucking joke. Like a DUI is like a big deal. Yeah. And in Arizona too, it's a really, really big deal. The saving grace for me was that I was only 17. If I had been 18, I would have gone to prison for a few weeks. Yeah. Which who knows how I would have handled that. Probably not very well. If you've seen pictures of me at that time.
Me neither, bro. Me neither.
But so yeah, man, I was at a very, very, very low point for myself, and the fucking school plays coming up. I was like, well, I need something to do. So I was like, I'll audition for this, and I just thought, you know, I'll just do my little comedic relief part, which is always what I had done, which I love to do, and it was the pretty famous movie or book. It's called The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, Pony Boy, and you know, there's a famous movie with a bunch of great actors. So they had a play version of it, so they were putting that up, and so I auditioned for that, and they're like, "Hey, man, like you're gonna be Pony Boy," and I was like, it was kind of a shock because I hadn't. I didn't even audition for that part. I auditioned for the funny guy, like his brother, Pony Boy's brother, who's like the comedic relief. And they're like, no, we're just going to have you do it. And that was a play. It was a really cool play. People are familiar with the material somewhat. Everybody's read the book, or it was assigned in school at some point. So like people know it. And so there's certain, it's about gangs, you know, white gangs. So there's like a certain like coolness to that play, and the way it was written is like my character never leaves the stage. So for 2 hours I'm on stage, living this whole thing, man. And like I remember there's a drowning scene. It's like the end of the first act where like I'm being drowned, and they had to teach us how to do like a stage drowning. But like that kind of like a physical thing I can really get into and sell really, really well as an actor. And my parents saw that play and they said, my dad was like, I almost stopped the whole play because I thought they were going to kill you.
Wow,
and he was like,
what a compliment.
He's like, it was one of the hardest things as a parent was watching this happen to you and not stopping it because I was worried it was real. I was like, that's fucking so sick. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. It's like I did my job. But anyway, and the camaraderie of doing a play, like talking to people, and you're hanging out with like your cast, and they're all these like kind of somewhat interesting artists. It's high school, so it's whatever. But God, it was just fun. It was so much fun. And I remember thinking like, well, fuck, can I just do this? Like, I don't have any other plans. Like, I do all right in school. Like, I don't really, I mean, I was never going to play professional basketball or like even in college. Like, I just wasn't that level. Yeah. And I was like, but this is like really fun. And people are responding, which is really, really key, I think, is that people would say like, hey, like, you're good. Like, you're doing really well. Like, this is impressive. And I think hearing that for any young person who's trying something, it's like so key to have positive reinforcement and to hear like, oh, okay, maybe I am good at this. Because if nobody fucking said anything, I would have just been like, okay, well, I'll just move on. I would have been doing something else. But that was the spark, man. That was the thing that lit it. And then I started looking at professional classes, like professional acting classes, because I was like, well, I can do these high school plays, but that'll end eventually. And then I was kind of like, I'm gonna go to college and do theater at UCLA or NYU or like some big theater school. So I ended up, that was my first like experience auditioning. You have to audition for these schools, but I didn't have the experience. Like people go to art schools and the only thing they do is theater, and they study and they work on their voices and all these things. And I was just a kid from Arizona who like had a enjoyment of this.
Yeah.
So I didn't get in anywhere. But I'll never forget at UCLA before I auditioned, the guy, the head of the thing, I don't know his name. He was like, well, so my first question to you all is, why are you doing this? Go be actors. It's like, don't worry about going to college. Like, what is this going to do for you? Go be actors if that's what you want to do. And everyone's like silent in the room. And he's like, okay, well, let's start the auditions.
Wow. What sage advice, actually, that you
huge,
took him up on later.
Did. Yeah. So I ended up going to, I went to UC San Diego, and I was there for a semester, and I was going to major in theater, and I was like, this is
Which
not
is
it.
crazy. That was such a hard school to get into, by the way, and you're an out-of-stater who got in.
Yeah. So it's hard after
that speaks to your academics. So.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. No, yeah, I did. I had a good grade point average, and I mean, that was my job. Like when I was growing up, is working on school stuff. But yeah, I was there for a semester. I was like, bro, this ain't it. Like,
yeah, that school sucks socially.
Yeah, definitely. And I was like, it was like a cool experience. You meet people, like the college experience, I guess.
And your brother went there, Todd, right? So that kind of maybe pointed you in that direction a little bit.
Definitely. Well, yeah, I ended up following him because, so he graduated and I was finishing my first semester, and I told my parents, I was like, I don't want to go back. Like, I just want to go to LA and be an actor, or New York, but LA's close to Arizona, so let me do that. And they were amazingly supportive.
Wow.
Like so lucky that they were, because I know people who aren't, and I could not do it without.
Yeah, it takes a village. And your dad's a college professor, or was, right? So for him to sort of give up his potential dream of a son in academia, because you're the last of the Mohicans, so to speak. That's really big of them.
Yeah, and my dad would, he was the one I was nervous to talk to, because I was like, well, he is a professor. Like this is what his life is. So he loves this thing. And he actually was the first one who was like, yeah, so leave. So college is still going to be there, Devin. He was like, if this is what's calling to you, you need to follow that. If you want to go back to college, like it'll be there. And which is true. They're still around, these colleges.
What?
Yeah, they are still around. So then I moved to LA, and when I was 20,
you were 20,
I was 20 because 20. I had to I knew I was gonna have to drive a lot, and I needed to wait to get my license back, which had been suspended post a DUI for 2 years. So I was like, okay. So I went back to Arizona, saved up money, and then my brother Todd, middle brother, graduated college, and he was like, I'm gonna move to LA, and I was like, perfect, I'm coming too. So we moved. I was with him and one of his high school friends, actually.
And we lived in Westgate.
Yeah, Westgate, man. That was on the west side.
Good days.
And I've been slowly moving east ever since. The west side is a different world, man. It's not. It's crazy to think I was over there. But yeah, so that was the getting to LA story, and then I was in it, man. And then I was like, and I told my parents, I made a deal with them. I was like, hey, I'm saving you guys like a fuckload of money on school. So you want to pay for some of these classes for me? And they were like, fine. I mean, I still had a job. I was working at the Coffee Bean. And so I would be working, but I took every class, man. I took improv and Playhouse West and casting workshops and all kinds of shit. But yeah, that was the story.
No, it's great. And man, you told that beautifully. So you're in LA. It sounds like you're doing some really smart tactical work on setting yourself up for success. And just to like paint it in a broad stroke, because I have my interpretation of these events. When I met you, you were sort of mid-stride. You were in a different class. You were in the Tuesday, Thursday, 9 a.m. advanced. If you recall, we didn't come up together. You were like almost a year ahead of me in Playhouse tenure. And then we met in improv. So can you talk to me a little bit about like when things started to take off? Because then we'll talk about the cool down process and sort of how you went through that and how that kind of showed where you are today.
Yeah, man. Well, where do I begin here? So I was taking class at Playhouse West because that was like the technique class. So that was like a very like technique driven thing because I needed to figure out how to use the instrument. Like I knew I had raw materials that were good, as we discussed before. Like I have sensitivity and I have an ability to access that. But it was random. Like I would have moments where I'm like, boy, like something would hit me in a scene. I'd pick up and I'd be like, oh, and I'd kill it. But I didn't know how to control it, and I didn't know how to make it show up on take one every time, which is what being a professional is. And so that was why I was like, okay, technique class. And on the other side, I was like, I've heard a lot. I've heard that casting directors like to see improv on your resume. That was the only intro. I didn't know anything about improv.
Smart. Same here, basically.
So I was like, I'll take some classes at the Groundlings, which is like a big school, and probably should have waited to go there because it's like a pretty prestigious place and it's like a serious study of comedy, which I wasn't really ready for. I just wanted to have fun. And I did. I had so much fun. When I tell you, like, the Groundlings was the most fun I've ever had in an acting situation. Just their approach, and it was all new. And that was what the beauty of that time was. I was 20 years old in LA on my own, taking these classes I'd never done before, just immersing myself in this world, and it was all new. It's like Buddha talks about the beginner's mind and how like important that is to learn new skills, because if you approach things with the beginner's mind, you never assume knowledge. Everything's new and exciting. So there's an energy to that, and I was living it, man. It was the fucking time of my life. I loved it. But so I was in there, and then I was in a Groundlings class, and how did I get my first agent? A manager. It was she was a manager. So I was doing casting workshops, and the place I was doing them, it's not there anymore. It was called Signature Studios. Doesn't exist anymore. There's a big crackdown on casting workshops, which is a whole different discussion. But they would do like showcase, like talent showcases or whatever. And so I signed up for one of those, and there was like 4 managers and an agent. And you come in and you perform some scene, and then you can give them your materials. You give them a reel and a headshot. And I was so young. It's like the guy from UCLA was 100% right. Like being young was the best commodity I had, because like you could still get in for young roles and start building a resume. So people are willing to take chances on you. It's harder when you're older, and it's like, well, fuck, man, I already have this guy who's got like 4 guest star credits. Kind of looks like you, and you guys would go out for the same roles, and you're new and you may be the most talented person, but like I'm gonna take the person with more experience. So if you're young, they're more willing to take a chance. So I ended up signing with one of those managers from the showcase. They contacted me, and she started sending me on some auditions. Her husband was an agent, so she put me with him. So I was with them. So I had an agent and a manager suddenly. And so I'd go out on some stuff, and like the audition process at that time, you would go in and you would do the materials, and I was going in for co-stars, like single line, couple of lines, commercials here and there. Didn't have a ton of success. I don't think I had got anything until I went out, but I was still doing my classes and my workshops, and I went to a casting workshop with this guy named Scott David, who's like a hero of mine because he ended up getting canceled, but not for impropriety, just because they needed someone to pin all this casting director workshop stuff on. So they took him down. He did a show called Criminal
Scott
Minds.
too.
Yeah. Love it. He only was ever the sweetest man to me. And he gave tons of people their breaks, man. He gave me a line in an episode of Criminal Minds. I still get residuals for it to this day. That was 15 years ago. And you can't even recognize me in the thing. It's like a wide shot. I'm like way in the background, and you hear me. It's like, oh, please no. Someone's like shooting a place.
Dude, can I jump in with a quick Scott David story?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I knew Scott, as well as you can by attending a few of his workshops, and same experience. Very sweet. You have to be good. He's not just calling you in because you showed up, right? You have to have a pulse. And he calls me in to audition, and it was one of the more awkward auditions of my whole life because my guy gets his neck snapped in the scene, right? And so I'm like, what
a fun little thing to play for, like,
in a sterile, wide trailer with no heart. I walk in, and I don't know what I'm looking at. Like, I see someone holding the camera. I see Scott. Then I see these two other people who I find out later, like the director and the producer, And I have like two lines. It's basically me as a cop walking down a hallway, and the like villain of the episode is walking next to me, and I recognize him, like, and then he kills me. And hey, wait a minute, aren't you?
Yeah.
And amazing. So I go, they're like, do you have any questions? And I'm like, yeah. Do you want me to die? Like in this audition? And they literally were like, And I'm like, no one asked this? Like, what's going on, right? Like, the scene continues. I mean, I'm dead on the ground. And they were like, yeah, sure, die. So I fucking do the scene, and the whole time I'm anticipating, right? Because my fucking neck snaps, and it happens. I do the scene. I don't even remember what the fucking lines were, and I like slump against the wall and just slide down. And it's dead silent. And I'm just sitting there in what feels like an eternity, and it's probably a few seconds. And then they're just like, thanks. And that was it, right? Like I didn't book that one, but
I didn't get that one. Huh?
That was a fun. Scott
I guess
David
you can die. Yeah, yeah. Why not?
Didn't give a shit. Didn't give a shit.
Amazing, dude. Yeah, it's and those early, like, if you're being brought in for a co-star in Criminal Minds, like you're really starting this journey. Like you haven't had a ton of experience, like. So it's a weird feeling. And then you go on to it. It was different, it was before self-tapes. You go on to the studio a lot, and you walk in, you see like these fucking posters of every movie you've ever loved. And like this is where they shot the thing. Like, oh my God. Like, am I going to see like that Brad Pitt somewhere? Clue, you never see Brad Pitt anymore.
Never Pitt.
But, but so it's an intimidating experience, for the first ones. But anyway, so I auditioned. He brought me in for a one-line part in the thing. I also died immediately, and didn't die in the audition. But but I ended up getting cast in that, and that was a massive deal because that was that got me into SAG. And that's like that's a really big entry level thing, especially if you're going to audition for like television, which is, what I wanted to do. You really got to be in SAG, and you got to have a credit. And so I'm like, bam, credit, SAG. I have an agent. I'm going out for things. But so back to the Groundlings. So I'm in a Groundlings class, and there's an older woman in there, and she's like, my niece is a casting director, and she's having a hard time casting this movie. I think she should see you. And I was like, that'd be great. Sounds cool. And I'm in my head, I'm like, this person's fucking crazy. Yeah, whatever you say, lady. But sure enough, I get called in for some movie. It had like a working title at the time. I actually don't remember, but it's like producers, Will Ferrell, That was the only name I needed to see. I was like, oh my God. It's like, that guy's my hero. Will Ferrell's producing this thing. And so I go in an audition, and it's like a big role. It's like the main kid in this movie, and playing opposite, may have been Will Ferrell, but I think they ended up casting someone else. But so it's like a big audition for me. Audition, do the thing. It was very nice. Casting manager was very nice. She was like, I am glad I brought you in, and that my aunt forced me to do this. And I was like, cool. Yeah, thanks. So the next day I'm just at home, and I get a call, and I answer, and I'm like, hello. And it's this guy. He's like, hey, Devin. I'm like, yeah. He's like, this is my name's Paul Young. I'm a producer on the movie that you had auditioned for yesterday. And I was like, oh my God. Like, in my head, I was like, holy shit, is this happening? It's like hearts jackhammering. And he's like, we loved your audition, man. Like, you're great. Not sure you're right for this role, but do you have a manager? Because we manage clients as well as like produce movies. And I was like, oh yeah, I do. And he's like, oh, okay. And I was like, but it's fine. No, who are you? Like tell me about you. So then I end up going to meet with him. And I remember walking in that office, and it's in like Beverly Hills on like a giant floor. At the time, it was a company called Principato Young Entertainment. So Peter Principato and Paul Young, the guy who called me, are the two like main guys. They've rebranded. The company's been split up. It's like a totally different thing. So you can't really find it now. But at the time,
really?
It was like
the company split. Wow.
Yeah, or they
were
sold
a fucking
part of it.
Powerhouse.
Yeah, they're called something else now. Artist First or Artist Way or something.
Interesting. They were like the premier managing team in comedy for like a decade, it feels like.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm talking a lot, but hopefully this is good stuff. But
oh my God, that's amazing, dude. This is exactly what it's for.
So I meet with Paul, and I remember going to that office and being like, holy shit, look at this office. This place is crazy. And my manager at the time just worked out of her house. So like I met her at her house.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Her husband was there. He's the agent. So it's a little operation they're doing. And she was a little weird. She wasn't my cup of tea, but I needed someone at the time.
Yeah.
And then I walked in, I met these guys, and Paul was like, hey, I'm Paul. What's up? I was like, so chill, Hawaiian shirt, shorts, sneakers. Everybody's like dressed casually. I was like, oh, I like this vibe a lot. And he's like, so this is the guy you're going to meet. His name's Joel. He's like, we're going to give you him. He's like, I'm your main guy, but this is the guy you're going to deal with. And I was like, okay, I don't know how anything works. So I met with Joel. Wonderful, wonderful guy. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to represent you. And we started talking about like my interests. And I told him I like doing comedy, but like I'm a serious actor. And I was like hesitant at the time to be with this company because they had such a comedy background, or like a calling card. Like people know them as like the company where there's a lot of comedic talent and people, and that's what they produced as well. And I was hesitant about it because I was like, I'm fucking Daniel Day-Lewis. Like, I am a serious actor, which was really dumb. But I ended up going with them anyway.
Yeah.
And it was like a light switch flicked. So I had to ditch my old manager. She was very sweet. I'm sorry about that, but it was just a business decision. And so I went with them, and with Principato Young, and it was like a light switch, man. It's like I'm going into massive parts now, like leads and features, series regulars, big guest stars on shows that we've heard of. And I was like, fuck, this is a lot, man. I was going out a lot, which is amazing. That's what everyone dreams of. But I wasn't probably ready in retrospect, mainly for the psychological hurdles of it. And I also didn't understand the actor-manager relationship very well. So I didn't ever come to Joel with like my problems, because I was like, he's too busy. He doesn't want to hear from me. Like I was like, oh, he's, so I'd be stewing in my own shit for like a long time. And I made it work because I was still in a moment of like, this is all still new and amazing. And I feel so lucky and grateful.
Yeah.
And so I started picking up little gigs here and there. Um, and by this time, I was probably 24, I think. And that's when I got Chasing Mavericks, and that was sort of the big shift for me.
With Gerard
Um,
Butler. Yeah.
yeah. So we can get into that whole story because that's kind of an interesting story too.
Absolutely.
But by this time, I had been doing plays at Playhouse, and I had been doing improv with you guys
Mm-hmm.
for Gibbon's Tale, and we were making sketches and stuff. And I like basically I finished filming Chasing Mavericks, and I think we started filming Richard Peter Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like that was like a crazy time, man. So by the time I was 25, I had like been in a big studio movie and directed my first movie, and I was like, God, I'm on top of the world. And boy, oh boy, did it all come crashing down. The humbling had to begin.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Before we continue, do you mind if we pause for a bathroom break?
No, it's perfect. Yeah, I got to pee too.
Right on. So we just took a quick bathroom break. Now we're sort of talking about the great humbling.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that we could we could go into like microscopic areas. But I kind of started. So like I'd mentioned Groundlings, really loved it there. But they are very intense, comedy, serious school where you get to a certain point and it's no longer you advance to the next class. It's you either advance to the next class or you're dismissed from the school. I was 22-ish and in their what's called their sketch writing lab. I'd never written anything before. Something I'm thrown in where I'm writing tons of stuff and never really. And I remember my teacher at the end was like, I think if you had a few more weeks, you really would have gotten there, but you're just too young, man, and you're not quite there. Which when you're young, you don't want to hear that shit. You're just like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? I'm funny, and he's like, you're a good actor, so that's kind of like, buoying you, but you're not. You don't have the like understanding of life, which was very, very true. He was completely right, but it was just hard to hear. Because comedy is so much about understanding like societal norms and like and then pointing out why they're weird or twisting them so they become a little bit weird. So like having these, so you have to really understand that and be able to notice and observe people. So there are young comedians that like do really, really well, but they're pretty rare. It's pretty rare to be like very young and really good at like sketch comedy. In my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. Even stand up, there's sort of like a what the fuck do you know attitude,
totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, really, you're telling me about life? You're 25. Shut the fuck up.
Right. Definitely. And then stand up's a totally different beast. So that happened. So I was out of the Groundlings, and that was kind of a blow. I was like, well, that sucks because I just like doing that. But I was like, I'm still doing the improv at Playhouse and with Gibbon's Tale, and I'm still enjoying that. So that's cool. I auditioned 4 or 5 times before I got Chasing Mavericks, and like,
and Greek. Didn't you audition 7 times before they?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and you were Anthony Hopkins.
That's right. Yeah, my character's name is Anthony Hopkins, which is literally like the writers wrote a joke because they thought it was funny there's a show about fraternities and for like the head of the fraternity to be like, any questions? And people would raise their hands and they'd point at me and go, Anthony Hopkins. And they thought that was just such a funny thing is to call this kid Anthony Hopkins. That was like the whole joke. And then they
didn't they give you a speech someone else had because he wasn't nailing it?
Not quite that. It was more they ended up extending my character along. So they rewrote me into multiple episodes. It was only supposed to be like 1 episode.
It's amazing.
So and then I ended up doing like 12 or 13. And each one was like, they're so co-star level parts. Like I never had a story. I was just sort of there to like deliver one-liners or like deliver little funny things. And I think I told you this once. I noticed the writers would start writing for me they'd start writing jokes based on like the rhythms that I would speak in and the way I would deliver the information of my other lines. So like my part was really delivering information to the leads. Like they'll be like, "Whoa, what about this thing?" And I'll be like, "Wait, but wasn't it because of this?" And they go, "Oh," like simplified version of that.
Yeah.
But a skill I have is be able to deliver those things in a funny way. So I would say these like kind of throwaway lines in a funny way. And so they started trying to write me funny lines, and then I couldn't make the funny lines funny, which is like a weird thing. But that was another example of how I just was pretty green. Like I didn't know how important the story was and like what my function as an actor with a small part is. It's like to continue that story. It's not to like to try to be funny or anything like that. But that was an amazing experience, like getting to be on this show about college life. I never went to college, so I got to do that. So that was a very important thing, and it was like consistent work. Like I would fucking kill for that today. So that I had a couple other TV gigs like CSI, a show called The League, which I was cut out of, and then Chasing Mavericks was a big one because it was like a studio movie. So that was Gerard Butler was starring. It's a movie about a famous big wave surfer named Jay Moriarty, and it's his movie. It's his bio picture, and then I'm like his troubled best friend. Perfect role for me. Guy from the wrong side of the tracks, or like at least is into some shady shit, which I've been, and also is kind of funny. It's like a sarcastic asshole, and that's just like strike zone, like lines up perfectly. And so I ended up getting in that movie, and it was because I had this manager, and they got me with an agent, and it was that big management company. Weird side note: the woman who cast the movie that I didn't get, but that got me with the manager. Does this make sense? The Will Ferrell produced movie. That's how I got introduced to Prince Pato Young. She was also the casting director of Greek. So she kept bringing me in for different stuff. Yeah.
Win the room.
Yeah, it's a really good point because I used to think like I got to book every audition. It's like when it's never going to happen. But if you do good work, you book the room and they'll keep bringing you in because they're fans. And like once you make fans, like that's a huge thing because getting auditions is very, very competitive. So yeah, man. So fucking do is great. I'm in Santa Cruz. They rent me a car and I have a hotel room and I'm living there and like being an actor.
Yeah, you were like gone. You were like gone,
dude.
Yeah.
And that movie was crazy because our director, Curtis Hanson, had heart surgery.
LA Confidential, 8 Mile, Academy Award winning Curtis Hanson, right?
Yeah. And so he was the director. So it's like Academy Award level director, gets very, very sick on set. He had a heart surgery and the medicine wasn't working and he just wasn't really there. And so they replaced him. They replaced him with the head of the DGA at the time, a guy named Michael Apted. It was a wonderful British guy and changed totally the movie. Like, no offense to Curtis, he was just he was sick. He was just it's a lot of fucking work to be a studio picture director. That's also somewhat of an action movie because you're waiting on waves. So they'd have to wait for like waves to break to shoot.
And really rare waves. Like Mavericks breaks like 15 days a year.
Yeah, exactly. So they'd be waiting and they'd be like, hey, Mavericks is going to fire tomorrow. So we need to change our entire shoot to go do the surf scene.
Yeah.
So that's a lot on someone who's just had heart surgery and is like on medicine. That's anyway.
And in his 70s, right? Like he's not a young buck at the time.
I believe that was the last movie he was involved in. And then he ended up passing away several years ago. And then Michael Apted, the guy who took over, also passed away kind of recently.
Oh, wow.
But very sweet guy. Said one of the best thing anyone's ever said to me. And I'm actually really glad I'm talking about this because I haven't thought about it in a while. We did a scene and he came up to me afterwards and he goes, "Where have you been?" And I was like, "What?" It's like, "Where have you been?" It's like, why haven't I seen you and stuff? And I was like, I don't know, man. And I don't know. I guess they haven't figured it out yet. And he's like, they will.
Mm,
They will. And he like walked away, and I was
mm.
like, damn, that was a fucking win, man. That was one of the best. Oh man, I got to remember that. I write that down.
Isn't it important? Like, like I don't think it's talked about enough. I had a similar experience that I cherish. Neil Brennan, the co-creator of the Chappelle Show.
Of
I got
course, yeah.
I got
I
hired.
love him too. He's one of my favorite comics.
Oh, he's one of the best, and he hired me for sort of a strange long form commercial that maybe Buick, one of these cars. I've worked for like 4 car companies at this point, which is pretty cool. But it was like a 3-minute or 5-minute spot. It was kind of really a fucking short film, right? But they like put it under the commercial banner. And I remember it was very heavy improv. And I'm in there with killers. Like, this woman's been a main stager for 20 years. This guy's and I was just like, "Ba-ba, ba-ba, ba-ba," and I could tell I was getting him because he was only 2 seats away. Basically, the setup was we're all sitting like as if we're being interviewed, like as a company. We're all like coworkers facing the camera, and we're all just like doing bits essentially. And I was just throwing wild ass bits out there, but bits that they could use, right? That's one distinction in improv and then improv for film that I would say a lot of people don't understand. Like, there's a difference between being able to be funny and improvising correctly for the film to serve the story and still being funny. And that's a different skill, right? Or at least in a different area of focus. Like, yeah, I
No,
can
yeah,
say the
it's
funniest shit, but if that's going to end up on the cutting room floor, kind of who gives a shit? And kind of it's a waste of time.
right.
And I remember he pulled me aside and he literally, it was just he and I, and he's like, dude, you're really good. Like, no, like really good. You should keep doing this. And I just think you should know that. And I remember being like, whoa, like the fucking guy who created the funniest sketch show of all time is telling me I'm funny. Like,
Yeah.
and it sticks with you. Whether
No,
he was
it's
saying that to
huge.
everybody or not, it doesn't matter. I got that. And
But there's something because I know that feeling too of like, oh, they're saying it to everybody. And it's like maybe, but
yeah,
also they don't need to.
yeah,
I've been on
that's
a
true.
lot of sets where
That's
nobody told
true.
me a goddamn thing afterwards.
That's
So
true. That's true.
uh the you know,
It's important to
so
give back in that way. Yeah.
totally, and if it's genuine, like
Yeah.
then it's worth it. Like if you feel
Mm.
that way, it's worth it to tell people because like I mentioned before, like people telling me I did well in this play in high school changed the trajectory of my entire
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And yeah, you hold on to little nuggets like that, your little wins sometimes because there's fucking dark days if you're doing this, if you're trying to make like the entire living as an artist, like there's gonna be dark days. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a fact. And it's good to have little fuel to keep you going, little things to touch back on. And like you don't hold on to it and like, oh, this is all I have. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like good to be reminded sometimes. Um,
Yes.
so yeah.
So
Um,
you're in the Chasing Mavericks. The movie's going. Director's been replaced.
yeah, in the movie, it's all it's a great experience. I mean, Gerard Butler's like a nice enough guy, and he was the main star, and the other actors that were in the movie that were like sort of my contemporary age people were very, very nice, and we got along great. Um, and then it ends, and you move on, and then a premiere comes, and we watch it. And I was like, "That's a pretty good movie," but it came out in like October. No one wants to see a surf movie in October, in my opinion.
Mm,
Um, so it did not do well in
mm,
the box office, and it's like if it doesn't do well, then it just never happened.
yeah.
But what did happen is that you get footage, and I'd love to impress upon anyone who's listening to this who's an actor. It's like the only things you have, like you have your work, yes, but no one gets to see your fucking work unless you have great pictures and great footage, and that's the only two things that you have. Um, and that's the most key thing to getting representation, and then getting auditions. Um, so it's like if your package, your like materials aren't in line, then like you're never going to be in the place you want to be. Which I would find out soon. So then I came back from that, obviously on a high. I don't think I booked another job for, I want to say 5 years, but a number of years.
Yeah, I
a number
remember.
of
That was a tough
years,
time. Yeah.
which is a long, long time.
And you were, and all that stuff we just talked about, like Greek, and that was like 2 years, right? Where it was just like really cracking.
All these things. The agent I was with at the time was like, "Oh, you're not going to read for commercials anymore. You're not going to read for Disney Channel or Daytime or Lifetime projects anymore because you're a movie actor and that's what you're going to do." And I was like, "Fuck, all right, that sounds sick."
Yeah.
Cool. So I go out for movies, and man, I went out for amazing fucking shit. Because like studio picture on my resume with this great representation, it's like I could get into amazing rooms, and I did some good work in them, but I never booked anything. And I was starting to get to a point where I didn't have another job, which is like my only goal in life ever. To that point in my life was like, I just don't want to work another job. I just want to do acting as my full income. Boom, got there. And I literally remember thinking like, well, what the fuck do I do now? Because I got the one thing I wanted. And it's like, I guess I could keep going with that, but it didn't feel right. And it never felt like I struggled enough, which is a crazy thing. But it was a weird mind thing, like mind controlling me, saying I didn't deserve it, basically. I didn't deserve the place I'd gotten to. And as you and I kind of know with our like spiritual practices now, like we create our own lives, and I created a life that said I didn't deserve the things I had, so all those things went away. Over a long enough time, I was doing plays, and I was doing really, really good work in the plays, and I got some terrible advice from one of my teacher directors, and she said, you need to have your manager come see you in this play. And I was like, I don't think that's really for him. Remember, he's a comedy guy. They're a comedy company. It's a very, very serious play. It was north of Providence.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Carol.
Yeah, which you were part.
You crushed
not in the
that
same
role.
play, but we were in the same night of plays.
Was that for Ashley Judd, that scene and that whole night? Or is it a
Ashley
different?
Judd? I don't know
Remember
about
when she
that.
came and did an advanced class?
Oh no, I've never met her. I don't know. And she was like, "You got to get your manager to come see this." I was like, "Okay, whatever." And so I started emailing him about it. "Hey man, I'm doing this play." Just like no response. I'd call him and get the assistant, and she'd be like, "Okay, yeah, we'll have Joel call you." He never called. And at the time, I let it bother me. I was like, "Well, what the fuck, dude? Like, this guy's supposed to be like my manager. Like, he should go like see my plays." It's like, let me tell you, he was a little busy because he was producing a show called Key and Peele and winning Emmys for it. So he had bigger fish on his mind than like my play in North Hollywood. But eventually I was like, got very upset that he wasn't calling me back. So I wrote him this insane email where I was basically just like, "Dude, I'm not happy with how things are going. Like, you're not coming to this thing. Like, you said you're going to be there for me, blah, 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 blah." And keep in mind, I was probably 26 or 7. So I hadn't like worked in a couple of years.
Yeah.
And so I immediately get a call. But I had gone into the gym. I leave my phone in the car. Come back. I've got like 3 missed calls and an email from him. And he's like, "Hey, man, sorry I haven't been 100% there for you. But obviously this isn't working out for you. So, I wish you luck finding your next manager." And I was like, whoa, fuck. That was quick. That was swift. Yeah. Maybe if I'd answered that call, he could have heard where I was coming from, that I was just a person who was lost and depressed and scared. Very, very scared because I hadn't worked in years. I was running out of money and I was like frustrated. So I put frustration toward him. Yeah. because I mentioned this before. Like I don't know anyone in this business. We don't have any guidelines.
Yeah, not nepotism, folks. So
Right.
it's beyond like the job access, right? Nepotism. You also have a village of people who understand the highs and lows of the industry
100%.
and can kind of like windfall you, like, oh, dude, this is normal. Just stick it out,
Yeah.
right?
Which I thought I did, right? Like it's like, oh, I've got these teachers or these people, and it's like, but then you look at who the people are, and you're like, well, actually, I'm not to be conceited, but I'm a higher level. I'm on a higher rung of the ladder than you are. So it's weird to take advice from you because you're older in age, but not necessarily wisdom about this career. And then like obviously my parents don't know anything. You know,
That's
like,
right.
well, guys, like this is going on. They're like, well, yeah, well, maybe you should go see your play. And it's like, no, he doesn't give a shit.
And that's okay.
Totally. Totally.
Okay.
Totally.
You think it's like all or nothing back then, right? I would feel the exact same. Everything you're saying, I relate to. I'm like, oh yeah, I would have felt like fucking insulted.
Oh, and
But it's
totally
just
all those
like,
things. And plus, like not responding about it. Like to say one thing, like if he had said, like, yeah, man, not for me.
yeah.
But he wasn't gonna say that because either he didn't have the time or he felt like maybe it was a mean thing to say and he didn't want to do it. And but like so many great lessons of like, man, this is a fucking journey. If you're making this your life, it's a lifetime. Like you have a lifetime of time. Like I hadn't worked for a couple of years and I was like tripping out. I was like, the world's falling. It's like, no, it wasn't. I just hadn't had my things hadn't lined up.
Yeah.
So it got dropped by him. And my agent's like, okay, that's weird, but we'll keep you because you're going out for stuff and you're getting brought in, you're getting good feedback. So we'll keep you going.
Were you at Koner still at this time?
Yeah, that was the Koner agency. They're still around. They're like a classic agency. And they're good. They do really good work. They have a lot of just like series regular working people. And so I got like, it had been more years go by. I'm like late 20s at this point. I was like hadn't worked a lot. I think I'd done maybe like one TV like co-star level maybe, and then some like web series thing. And the whole time still like we're producing sketches and like making our own material, like, but it's not stuff that moves the needle necessarily for the business.
Yeah.
So I get a call one day from Koner Agency from my guy there, this guy John. He's like, "Hey man, it's a tough call to make, but we're gonna let you go." And I was like, like totally freaked out. And he's like, "Yeah, man, it's a numbers game." I was like, "But I just did like a Lifetime movie." He's like, "It's a numbers game, bro." He's like, "We look at our spreadsheet of actors and how much money they earned us, our company, and the bottom like 10 people just get cut. And then we bring in 10 more and we see how they fare." And I was like, "That's like how our business works." And I was like, "Well, fuck, dude." And he's like, "Yeah, you're a really nice guy. I like you, man. But this is what the reality is." So suddenly I'm now, had been at, you know, in a really, really good place with amazing opportunities. And now I have no representation. I have nothing, you know, I'm just back to square one. And it was like really fucking hard, but it also kicked something up in me and said like, well, fuck it. I'm not going out this way. But I look at what I was doing at the time and like I let everything decay. Like my reel was trash. Like I hadn't even updated it with like new footage that I had of myself from shows and stuff. Pictures are old, they don't represent me anymore. And I'm like, I let all these things just sort of die away because I expected them to continue. And they didn't. So, but you realize you have to be on top of that stuff, and the materials is all you can control. So if you always keep on top of your materials, fix all my materials. And I started firing off emails to people I knew. I was like, "Can you get me with your manager? Can you get me with your agent?" I've received those things before. I've always tried to be as generous as I can, helping people with representation. But so I ended up finally getting with a different manager, and he was like, "Oh, you know, I recognize you from Chasing Mavericks." He's like, "I remember thinking you were good." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." So I ended up going with him, and so I ended up getting more auditions again. And then he got me with an agency.
Is this Tim Taylor at Luber Rockland?
Yes, Tim Taylor at Luber Rockland.
I know
He got me
Tim.
with an
Are you
agency.
still with him?
No.
Yeah.
Which was weird situation. Tim, in my experience, is a guy who like has like a new shiny object and like wants to play with it and like use it a lot. And then if it doesn't like pop off in the first 8 months, he kind of like loses a little interest. And at a certain point, I was like, "Hey, man, I got to send you like a bunch of commission payments from these like jobs that I did." And he's like, "Dude," he's like, "I'm not doing anything for you, so like you should just save your money." And like, I was like, "Oh, okay, so you're not representing me anymore." He's like, "I don't think I should." Okay, so so like it's been a cycle, man. There's like I've had a lot of different reps, um, and so fast forward to here now, I still have that same agent I had at the time. We've been through COVID. Um, I've worked here and there. I have not gotten to that same place of like studio movie levels, but it's like even are there even studio movies anymore? Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and things, jobs come here and there, and it's like I audition, I do my auditions, and I focus on myself a lot because when I look back, I'm like I wasn't a healthy person from like mentally and emotionally. Uh, and that a lot of I had behaviors driving me that were destructive behaviors that I hadn't examined. And I know I can talk to you about this because I know you've done a lot of work on yourself too.
Yeah.
And it's really, really important. I think when you use your body as your instrument to be a good person, not a good person, but a person who's healthy in those ways.
Yeah, it's funny. Tony Savant, a mutual teacher of ours at different times, when I was in his beginning class, somebody's like, "What does it take to be a great actor?" Essentially, right? And he was like, he turned, how he would turn over his left shoulder,
Oh,
and
sure.
he'd go, "Know yourself." And at the time, I'm like, "The fuck is this?" Now I know myself,
Yeah.
but I look at it like I spent 10 years at least building the cage of technique, but there was no foundation within. And so it was like leaking, it was shoddy, it was unpredictable. Like,
Totally.
yeah, I could fucking act my ass off, but the foundation around it, the business, the peace
Yeah.
between the lulls and all these things was not there. So it was like cataclysmic, and it doesn't matter how fucking good you are if you're a
No.
nightmare to yourself and others.
Yeah, and like it sounds super intense when you say nightmare to yourself and others, but it's like because it's not that clear. I don't think. I don't think it's clear to yourself. Um,
Until you're through it and can look back on it in some way.
right. But like God damn man, if I never went to therapy, like I don't want to know.
God.
Like just to
Yeah.
start there, and then that's like a one piece, and then I've we talked about this before, but like I added on like meditation and like a spiritual practice and like a purpose that's beyond whether I book this job or not. So it's not so fucking important. And like yes, when auditions come, it's giddy and it's exciting, and or it's shitty and scary. I've had all the reactions to getting auditions, or you'll get things and you're like, this is not something I want to be doing. So what do I do? This sucks. My life. And it's like learning not to spiral and realize like this, you don't have to attach to these things. It's like really, really key.
That's
For me
really
at least. Yeah.
crucial because I had a dark few weeks, a few weeks ago now, and it was important to go through that. But one of the lessons I pulled out of it through my therapist coach was like catch it at level 1 before it gets down to level 5, where it's like almost it's too late. You're in it.
Yeah.
And so I've really been developing those noticing or awareness tools to be like, okay, I'm at level 1 right now. How do I sort of give this a little space and a little air to get underneath it? That's been super helpful to catch it before a fucking spiral, because the spirals go deep and they get
Yeah.
dark.
Yeah, man. And it's the things that set you off, right? It's like, I'll just have a thought. I'll just wake up one morning and I'm just like, huh. Like, remember when like that guy said that thing to me?
Mm,
And then like that stews a little bit and I'm
mhm,
thinking about it. And then it's like, well, he said that because you're a fucking loser. And it's like, God,
mhm.
I am a fucking loser. And it's like, yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't booked a job in a while. I must be a loser. And then like it just deepens and deepens the well, man. It's like,
yeah,
so you're right. Catching
yeah,
those intrusive thoughts when they first appear is important.
yeah, man. That's
And I'm healthier
a game
now. It's like even
changer.
when I was successful, I'm still very successful now. I'm very happy with my
Mhm,
life. But when I was on, you know, so to speak, rising the roller coaster like pretty
mhm,
straight up for a while, I'm much happier now. I'm just like so much more peace, which is much more
mhm.
important than success to me.
Yeah, I had a download yesterday. Maybe it was 2 days ago. My therapy sessions are every Tuesday morning at 9, and I shared it, so it must have been on Monday. But anyway, I was just sitting there reflecting, and I heard the message: "The feeling is the reward." And what I took that to mean is like, wow, I've been chasing, like, I do a gratitude practice so that I can call in more stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, why am I calling in the more stuff? Oh, it's to feel. So if I'm already feeling grateful and that's like as close to bliss as possible, isn't that the reward? And that
Wise
is, I'm
man.
still chewing on that, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously we need things to exist in the world and all that, but it came through and it was really helpful for me, and I wanted to share that with you.
Yeah. I mean, one of the first things that drew me to like meditation and spiritual practice was that I was like, wait, you can manifest stuff? Like
Mm-hmm.
I can sit and wish for things and it
Yeah,
works. And
yeah.
so that was sort of the appeal at first. And then like you do it long enough and you're like, actually, like I just feel so good just like meditating and like getting
Mm,
quiet and being here. I don't really need anything else. So
yeah,
I don't really care if I get the things or not,
yeah.
and
And you
then weird
become
shit starts to
powerful.
happen.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's
it's
when you go like, that's when I feel like the things open and you're like, wow, crazy.
yeah. And you just did a movie in India,
Yeah, yeah. So that was one of
so
those experiences, man, where I was just like, this is a wild, just
yeah.
couldn't have like drawn a picture of like what I wanted more perfectly. It's a comedy, it's a romantic comedy movie. I play an idiot, an absolute just moron. It's
And
great. I
you're
would
out there
love.
for weeks, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I was only filming for 3 weeks, and then I just traveled because I was like, how many times am I going to be in India with flights
Amazing.
paid for?
Yeah.
So I was like, just push my flight back 2 weeks. I'm just gonna go explore on my own dime, And they're like, that's fine. Just as soon as you're done filming, do whatever you want, buddy.
Mm.
Um, and I wanted to actually talk a little bit about the working in India
Yeah,
because,
that's why I wanted to bring it up too. It must be
yeah,
interesting and different, Bollywood, right?
yeah, man. So it's the people who work on the crew members and stuff. They're all local hired. They're all Indian people, except the director of photography and the director are American. Everybody else is from India.
Fascinating.
So, and
And there's like a recognizable cast in the whole thing, you know?
yeah, the like the Indian actors, I don't really know anything about Bollywood, but the Indian actors are all like pretty recognizable. Like if you look at the IMDb page of the film, it's like all the Indian people and then like some of the American actors, and like because they're big over there and like they're very excited to do like a Hollywood movie.
Mm,
That's like seems very cool. And we're like, well, we're in India. This is awesome.
yeah.
Uh, so man, it was quite an experience. Like some of the things, it's funny. It's just like an American set, but like a funhouse mirror version. It's just slightly different. It's like it's like there's so many fucking people. That's the thing. That's the main takeaway, I think, is like for every job on a Hollywood set, there's like 4 people doing that job in India.
Yeah.
So there's just people everywhere. I had to pull in one scene, I did the, like, guys, can you move?
Yeah.
Because I'm like looking at this actress, my girlfriend in the scene, and then right here is like 4 guys staring at me wide-eyed, staring directly into my face. And I was like, I can't not see this. Like, your energy is hitting me. So they were very sweet about it.
Dude,
but
side note about the Christian Bale thing. I totally get it.
Oh, 100%.
Like, he's there to fucking deliver, and so are you. And you know what works, and you know what's wasting time, and it's an easy adjustment. Move your fucking body, right? So, like, people give him shit, but they don't understand a set. Maybe he went a little too wild, but probably because he wasn't doing the practice of speaking his fucking honest truth before that, and it just built up. He's probably in character and couldn't, and might even, like, I've done this before too. I don't know if you've ever done this where I'm like all of a sudden feeling a real life feeling that works for the scene. So I keep pouring it on. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm going to actually keep twisting this knife within myself because I don't even need to worry about any emotion because I got it right here from the fucking crew. So, yeah. So I just wanted to jump in and say, like, I think that gets a bad rap because it is fucking hard enough. And then you have crew right off camera sometimes who don't understand. Most crew do, obviously. But
yeah, and like, I think in my situation, it was a function of, like, there's not enough space. Like, there's so many people, they don't have anywhere to go. And we're just like in a room. It's like an apartment building room for the scene. But yeah, I don't blame. Anytime people are like, an actor freaked out on set, I'm like, good.
Yeah.
Not that you should be a childish. You shouldn't be childish, but it's a hard fucking job. Even though it's incredibly simple.
Yeah.
In fact, the simplicity of it is what makes it so hard.
Yeah.
And like, and so, when people like freak out, I'm like, I give them a pass.
Yeah. In fact, I had a meeting last night with another producer, and I was like, after the stocking fields, I realized that if my main, like, core crew, meaning like they're there every day, doesn't matter what position you're at, if I don't see them or hear of them having at least one venting or negative kind of motherfuck like kind of moment, then I actually need to check in. Because making a movie is hard, and we're humans and we're artists. And now if your blow-ups become centralized and often, meaning like they're affecting the dynamic of the energy of the set, we're gonna have a conversation. But I've had, I won't say who, but I had a person on set who, like, every time I checked in with them, they were like, it's great, everything's fucking great. And I'm like, even at that time, but this is 2018-19, I wasn't doing the self-work and analysis, but I still knew. I was like, dude, this sucks. Like, it's hard fucking work what we're doing and what I'm asking you to do. So are you sure you're okay? And he's like, we're making a movie, life is great. Cut to like a year and a half later, he's screaming at me on his front porch. So I'm like holding a hard drive, like, huh? Like, what happened? Like, what literally is happening right now? So that was a good lesson for me.
Yeah, man. It's speaking your truth is important, I mean, you and I clashed a fair amount, I would say, in our 20s, because
absolutely.
I think we're both people who didn't have the tools, at that time to, like, sensibly talk out our problems and be able to air grievance without feeling slighted and on both, I mean, both of us, of course.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
But one quick India side note, because I want to just wrap up these thoughts.
Of course.
So all these people, it's like I walk out of my trailer, like 4 guys come up to me and they're like, "What do you need? What do you need? What are you doing? What's up? What's up?" I'm like, "Fellas, like, I'm just like walking over here. Like, you need a coffee? You need one thing?" And they're bored because there's not anything to do on a set most of the time, and there's already too many people, so they don't have anything to do, so they're just sitting around, so they just want to help. And I'm just like, I'll fucking take a coffee, sure. So like 2 guys run off to get coffee, and then anyway, so there's a lot of people. The assistant director, the AD, walks around with them. Maybe they do this on some American sets. I've never seen it with. It's usually they're just yelling, right? The AD just yells stuff. He has a microphone and like it's connected to like a PA that's like on the set, and it's like, so he'll speak into it to talk to everybody, I guess, because there's so many people, they can't all hear him. And so instead of saying quiet on set before they do a take, they scream, silence, silence, like that. It's like that rhythm. It's like silence, silence, and they fucking scream it. And I was this other actor, this guy Jonathan Bennett, was like, you know what's so good at getting people to quiet down is screaming at them the word silence,
especially before like a rom-com, that the energy should be like soft and flowy.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is like, it's like by the end of the shoot, I was just like, this is what's happening. He's about to scream.
Yeah.
Scream, silence, silence. And now we're about to roll. The first time I was like,
yeah,
is he okay? Like, why is he yelling at them?
Yeah, he's having a bad day. Pavlovian response.
Yeah, totally. It was so yeah, that stuff was wild, man. And then but amazing experience. Movie comes out this summer. I don't know if this will be out in time, but it's should be interesting. It's an interesting thing because it's like, I mean, you know, like, look at me, I look way fucking different than like when we were working together, and you know, back in the day in our 20s, like I was like a clean cut, short haired guy. It's like, if you're in this business long enough, like you can change, you will change because you're going to grow older. It's like I was 20 and I was reading for high school parts, and I was reading for college parts, and then I couldn't read for any parts because I didn't book anything for years because I didn't fit in anywhere. I was too old to be young, and I was too young to be old.
Yeah, that was a good lesson. I remember that you shared. Yeah. You were like a casting director or someone was like, I don't know what to do with you because like you look this way, and then you open your mouth and your natural like charisma and character is actually the opposite of what I perceive you as in a like snapshot. And I was like, oh, like he's in this like sort of chasm of uncastability until his 30s.
Totally. Yeah.
It's an odd space. I mean, Holly Gagne literally was like, Sean, you probably won't start working to your early 40s. That's what she told me, like within a month or two. She's like, and I was like so crestfallen. And she was like, but look, if you wait,
no one wants to hear that.
Yeah, she's like, you're gonna work all the fucking time, because she's like, I lay bets. She's like, I can't really cast you right now. I don't know like what you are. But like by the time you sort of age into it, she's like, you'll really have a look.
Like, no, totally. And it's 100% true.
Yeah.
It's like, and I've
that one
personally like changed my look. Like I have a beard now and like long hair. It's like I didn't look like that really at all. Tattoos too, yeah. Not super visible. It's not like on my face or anything, but
it's definitely, it does something.
It's a vibe. It's a vibe for sure. Yeah. I mean, in the Indian movie, like one of the audition scenes, I'm shirtless in it. So like you see my tattoos, and it's like, that's gonna do something. That's gonna paint a picture for whoever's looking at it. And yeah, man, it's should we talk about tattoos? Because it's a fascinating thing, because I used to think like, oh, I can't ever have tattoos because I'm an actor.
Same.
But it's actually brought me closer to myself. I feel more myself because I'm represented in like outwardly in a way that I think reflects me more.
And they're beautiful and personal, and
it's interesting because it's like when you become closer to yourself, you become a better actor. This is something I really wanted to touch on that I've been thinking a lot about lately, and it's basically like the basis of my entire like work as an actor right now is like, I don't try to do anything but me anymore. It's like,
Mm.
it's just Devin. And every fucking role, I'm just Devin. And it's the hardest goddamn thing to
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I came here, I was 20 and I thought I was fucking Marlon Brando with like a sprinkle of Daniel Day-Lewis. I was like, I'm going to change and I'm a chameleon and I'm going to do these weird voices and like mannerisms and shit. And it's fun on stage and you can get away with it a little bit. But if you want to work as an actor in Hollywood, there's like 3 actors that get to do that. It's like
Yeah.
Joaquin Phoenix, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Jake Gyllenhaal or something. You know, there's
Yeah.
like a couple guys that
Yeah.
get to do that kind of work. Most people are selling the thing they're selling.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Goldblum, Christopher Walken, these classic actors, Keanu Reeves, the both of the Owen Wilson, Luke Wilson, like
Mm-hmm.
they do a thing, and you go, it's that thing, and then people who don't understand acting or the business go like, well, they play themselves every time. It's like, yeah, no shit, dude. That's
Yeah.
what's interesting about them.
Yeah. It's risky and vulnerable and really hard. Like I had this audition last week for a Shonda Rhimes show, and immediately I'm like, this guy has like he does a little bit of like a lilt, like he talks like a little bit slower and stuff. And Eddie was like, why? And I realized immediately I was protecting myself from being myself. And like, it's like, yeah, because I could have I did end up doing the part just like through me. So I'm sort of going through that as well. Like, I just need
Yeah.
to apply me here. That's it. How do I apply me to every fucking word of this?
Yeah, it's actually because it's the only interesting thing you can do. Like there are
Mm-hmm.
legions of white men
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be actors. We're
Yeah.
not unique really in any
Yeah.
way, except when we're ourselves, because we're of course unique people.
Yeah.
But if we're trying to do something else, it just waters us down. Like it's really, 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 really hard to do with things that you don't feel like you're right for. So like I'll go out for anything military. I'm like, it's just not really my vibe, man.
Yeah.
You know, and I know it. So I end up reaching for it and I'm doing like a military thing and I'm like standing and I'm speaking very like clipped. And I'm like, I know I'm just a robot, bro. I'm like
Mm-hmm.
a facsimile of what I
That's
think this
right.
thing should be, as
And the
opposed to being
truth
like,
is, military guy can be anybody.
exactly. There's sarcastic guys that have like,
Yeah.
that sound like me, you
Yeah.
know, 100%.
100%.
And it's just like, wow, that's actually the superpower. But you're right. And I don't know if you said self-protection and like maybe that is it. It's because like look, when we get auditions, especially for good shows or good projects with people that you respect that you want badly,
Yeah.
the stakes get higher and it gets scarier because when you put yourself out there and you don't get something,
That's right.
it's
So
really
if you're
hard.
yourself in the take and they don't choose you, it's even worse because you're like, God damn, not like that was
Because
it.
they didn't choose me.
That's right.
It wasn't even my acting. They didn't like
Yeah.
me, which
Yeah.
is scary, but that's what the job is.
Yeah. And it's also absurd because I've been on the casting side. I dated a producer, a high level commercial producer, a little bit different, but I assume similarities between it's usually the speed. That's what I learned. The speed of commercials, television, and film differ, but that's really it. Like film takes the longest, television second, commercials clip like this as far as production. And they had huge clients, like fucking $1 trillion company big. And I remember some of the conversations being like, when they're looking at the casting sheet and they're like, too white, too black, too fat, too what, and it was just like, what? They're like, no one's going to discuss the acting. And they'd be like, well, everybody's good. Now we're just
Right.
kind of making sure it looks right. I mean, I even heard that story about John Hamm talking before Mad Men. I mean, I didn't hear this before Mad Men, but he's talking about his time before. And he was super frustrated. And I believe it was Randy Hiller, casting director extraordinaire, was like, dude, like, we're just looking for good enough, but exactly the right look for most of these parts. Just good enough. But if you look at a dead shot then we're probably going to cast you if you can just like get through the lines.
Yeah, can
And
you
I
like
was
walk
like,
and talk at the
fuck.
same time? Yeah.
Yeah. Because most of the stuff we're going out for isn't the 10% material we trained for, which is
Right.
the other confusing piece. Like at Playhouse, all you're doing is the 10%.
Yeah, which is really fulfilling and
Yeah.
incredible to experience, and you learn so much. And like, it's literature, you know, plays are literature. They're held up. They win Pulitzer prizes. You know, there's no Pulitzer
Yeah.
Prize for screenplays.
Yeah.
Not to bash them, but
Yeah.
um, but so you're working with these incredible like authors too, you know, like Arthur Miller
Yeah.
or what, you know, although he
Yeah.
mainly did contemporary pieces, but like
Mhm.
still Neil Simon, any of these guys are you know, people. And then you get your auditions and it's just not that at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, and honestly, depending on what you look like, depending who your reps are, depending how many credits you have, you may never get to the point where you get to read anything interesting. But can
Yeah.
you make a living
Yeah.
doing uninteresting stuff? Sure. Yeah. I don't
Absolutely.
mind that.
And you can create your own stuff. As we wrap up here, um, I want to highlight like how, and it's been interesting because I've sort of not let you isn't the right words, but I don't try and interfere with like your perspective of Richard Peter Johnson. But to me, it's a massive success because I mean, you locked yourself in a fucking room and wrote it in like a business week, like 4 or 5 days. You directed it. Like, I don't really know. I mean, we helped, but like, you really, and you acted in the movie and you were constantly like rewriting. And I remember just really enjoying you as a director because obviously you're, I think, maybe the most gifted actor I know, especially at my age group. And then you were just like so humble about the words. I know because you had written it fast and we had done a ton of prep together. So you didn't feel necessarily like that Aaron Sorkin ownership of the language, maybe. But you were so willing to be like, yeah, best idea wins. Like, what are we doing? Right.
Oh,
And so
always that. Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight that because it was an incredible feat, especially like the older I get. I'm 36 and I'm looking around and like not many people have made a feature film or
Right.
can even just say that. And we did.
Yeah, man. I mean, I would love to talk about it because I was listening to your episode with Gabe for this
Mm,
podcast, and it's fun to hear you guys talk about it. Because looking back, I mean, it was so much fun to do the shooting of it. The way that it came about was like crazy.
yeah.
Uh, you know, like it was just sort of ambush, but we never would have done it otherwise.
Yeah, that's
This
what I
is
figure. Like I definitely fucked up but the way I did it again, like we talked about earlier. No real skill set and communication. I was months and months of frustration on my end that I wasn't really saying that
yeah.
much.
Well, it's fun. It's funny, man. It's like my times working with you, like I did a lot of interesting, cool stuff. I haven't done a lot since we kind of stopped
Mm,
like creating together.
mm,
And I used to really honestly resent you like a lot
yeah.
because you were a, I don't want to say drill sergeant, but like you cracked the whip a little bit. You
Militant.
got shit done. You got
Mm,
shit done, which I will sit and I will think and I will ponder for eternity and never get anything done. Um, because that's my comfort zone. It's really hard to get out of it. But once I'm knocked out of it, like you kind of did with the film, is like, it's happening, guys. So let's do it. And I was like, well, fuck. I think the reason I ended up directing it is because I was like, I have the most time because I don't have a second job. So I was like,
mm.
I just have the most time, so I'll
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. I'm glad you did.
And the
Thank
script,
God.
I mean, the script we wrote it as an improvised script. I'll never forget this moment when I told you we watched Spinal Tap.
Hmm.
This is Spinal Tap, that movie, and we
Hmm.
watched it and we are kind of like enjoying it. It's a great movie, and I was like, they made this movie off of like a 7-page script. It was like a 7-page outline. They just improvised the rest of it, and you your eyes lit up like you had seen God, and you were like, 7 pages, that's all it took? I was like, yeah, because they improvised the whole thing. And I was, and then that's, yeah. And I was like, oh, he's got ideas here. Because one of the big things is like, you can sit around rewriting a script for forever. It'll never be perfect until you got to go shoot something. And I mean, you want it to be perfect, as good as it can be, but at a certain point, you can be there forever. And I am a person who will be stuck there forever unless I'm pushed out of it right now. Something I'm working on. But yeah, so we ended up, so I was like, all right, well, and then I sat down with you. And I was like, well, we got to figure out what this is. Like, what is this movie? And so we were talking about it. We're like, okay, we can improvise it. And we started building from there, and we built the characters and what the sort of overall change the character goes through, what the story is. Once we had those strokes and we got some input from different people of like what they kind of character they might want to play in the thing. And then we sort of like wrote these scenes, and I honestly had a pretty good time because it was such low stakes, because like there's nothing without this. So I'm just going to write these scenes, and like I think this is kind of funny, but like Kyle's going to make it funnier. So I'll just do that, and then he'll figure it out. And it was a lot of fucking fun, man. I really enjoy directing too, but I just don't do it enough because anymore I don't really have the I don't have the crew. I don't have the people around me. They're all beyond, all the directors of photography I've worked with. They're all working on TV now. Like I can't get him
out there still.
Oh yeah, man. He's on some show. He's got like a wife and baby now.
I'm sure.
So yeah, and like Alex, the guy who shot RPJ, Grossfeld. I mean, he's on some show too.
I run into him quite a bit. He lives in Toluca Lake. When I see him on walks, we're always like,
oh man, yeah, I really liked him. We got along really well. But I really enjoyed the time, and like the product that came out of it. I'm proud of the fact that there's a story there. I think there's a clear story, and I think there's some funny moments.
It's funny. It's got some heart. Like,
there's some. It's silly. It's not I wouldn't say it's a good movie. It's not a thing I would tell anybody. You have to watch this, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this is a good snapshot into where we were at a time when people were creating their own stuff, but like we couldn't shoot a whole movie on our phones.
Yeah, I look at it like this, you know, and maybe this isn't the right way to take art into context, but it's almost like you could parallel it to sports. Like, who's more impressive? The prize fighter who had the $1 million camp with the oxygen tank and the pool training and the 12 trainers and the nutritionist and the fucking sports psychologist, where the guy who trained in his backyard with a log, and, you know, they both showed up to the same pro event. And it's like, we made that movie for fucking $10,000 prayers and wishes. And we made it. We made it. And people can't even fathom that. And most people don't even understand nor care. And I don't blame them. And I'm not asking them to. But that's how I feel when I talk about it in terms of success. We had a $10,000 movie, literally. And we got James motherfucking Franco in it. Remember me and you asking him?
God, dude.
This is how I tell the story. I don't know what your interpretation of that event was, but so Devin and I were lucky enough, I'll say, to be invited in this sort of advanced class that James came back for. He was a fucking legend at our school, not by his fault, but the school was like, he doesn't even sleep, you know, like that's right, like it was just like a god, right? Much to his downfall in a sense. Like, how could he even live up to that, right? And so he comes back to the school at the height, like he had just won the Oscar, I believe, for 127 hours, or nominated. I don't know if he won, but he was certainly very good in that. And he's teaching this like Clifford Odets class, but they're like filming it. And Devin and I, you know, for all intents and purposes, are like loved at the school in a sense. Like, we have a good crew, you know, like we're in the height of sort of our the peak of the school, like our education there, right? You know, we're in the advanced classes. We're doing what we want with improv. Anyway, just sort of painting the picture. So we're like, the whole time we had been writing it for Jeff Goldblum, right? But we were like, we could never get Jeff, right?
Yeah.
But he probably would have been easier, actually. Not because he's easy to get, but just because he ended up being more accessible, like almost immediately after that. And we ended up taking this class, and we kind of looked at it. We're like, "Whoa, like James? Like we're using James in the movie. Like we have James. Like this is perfect. Like we should ask him. No, you should ask him. Well, you're the director." And we're like, okay. So, you know, we're like, all right, when do we fucking ask him? How do we do this? And we go back after class or before class, but I just remember he was changing in sort of the waiting area where you'd prepare for Studio One, if you can picture this in any Playhouse Westerns. And I believe he's changing because I remember this like really beautiful blue leather jacket he had. And
it was a nice jacket. I think he wears it in the movie.
Yeah, I think he does too.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. And I remember we go back there and we're like, "Hey James, can we ask you something?" And then I black out as like, because I don't hear, but you're the one who asked him. You had the courage to ask, and you're like, "Hey, we got the small part. Like, it'll take you no time at all. You'll just show up. You'll fucking knock it out. It's super easy." And he's just like, instead, you know, when a person thinks, they're like, right? But James, I remember being like, just staring at you. And I'm like, what's happening? Right? It was probably 2 seconds, but it felt like a motherfucking eternity. And he's like, yeah, sure. And then he did. And then he showed up a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever we had set up in his little red Prius. And it was crazy because, you know, it was me, you, John Roney, or was it Grossfeld? I think it was Roney.
That was Roney, yeah, because we couldn't get Alex at the time, so he was my friend
bummed.
Sean.
And so
he was bummed. Yeah, he did the whole fucking RPJ shoot, which was like improvised. Just like listening to these actors, just like, dude, they're masturbatory improvising, and he has to stand there like shaking, holding this fucking camera. I'm like, keep rolling.
Our poor editor Pam. Like, I didn't realize you need to give edit points to an editor and improv. Anyway, but so I remember you were super nervous, and I mean, we both were, obviously. I'm acting in it. So like, I'm like, I better not fumble my fucking one line, you know?
You're like a plainclothes cop, right? And he's and he's a detective.
I literally do like a pop in, like, like, you know, I should have written myself a better scene now that I think about it. Right. You know, like, got a chance, like, you should have thought a little more forward than that.
I think we thought it would be funny because the whole movie is building up to you being in this movie with James Franco, and then to see it's the one line. Like we thought that would be really funny.
No, you're absolutely right, and that was what served the story best. So that's why we did it. And but I remember really, and I tell this story to this day, and not in a disparaging way ever, obviously. But we were both nervous, and I remember you telling me like, dude, when I get nervous, I overtalk. So you're like telling him like what the scene's about, right? And he's just listening. And then he stops and he's like, so, okay, so I just want this. And he like distilled it really simply. And you were like, yep, because you were wise enough to know when your actors got it, walk away. And we shot 3 takes and he fucking nailed it.
It was a complicated shot. The only reason we did 3 takes was because we were like, we don't have a lot of time with him. Yeah, so we're gonna make it a cool shot so it looks like a movie. So we dollied in. It's like a dolly pan up into his face, and he delivers like a line. You say one thing and then he delivers a line. And well, so he showed up. So that is the story. I don't remember what we said to get him to do it, but I just remember being there and him pulling up, and we have our fucking dolly track laid, and we're like so prepared because we're like, we're just gonna get him one. We don't want. He's doing us a massive favor.
He didn't take any money or.
No, he didn't. Yeah, didn't say anything about that. And And look, I mean, he's had his issues in the public, but like I will ride for that man forever because of that.
Yeah, same.
Anyway, yeah, I went up to so he comes up to me. It's like dead silent. He gets out of the car. Everybody's just quiet because it's like, oh, it's fucking James Franco. And I was like, I gotta go talk to him because I'm the director. I have to talk to him. And I was like, hey man, like thanks for doing this. And he's like, yeah, I'm like, oh fuck. He's like mad. He hates me. Okay. He's like, I better tell you what you're doing. And he's like, yeah, you probably should. And I was like, okay, so you're gonna come over here and this is the body and this is a dead guy and you're a cop and I am doing that sort of like word vomit thing. And he's like, he stops me and he goes, why am I doing that? And I was like, so what he does is he takes the murder weapon out of the victim that he
the
the
silver
murder
blade
scene.
of Couture.
Yeah. And he looks at
Harris
the
wrote that
dagger
scene.
and then he pockets it. And he's like, why am I taking this thing? And I was like, well, it's the silver. And I was like, oh, he wants to know. Okay, maybe this is how he works. I'm like, well, it's the silver blade of Couture, which is like a vampire killing device, which you've seen in your family's history for like millennia. So you know about where very well. And he looks at me like, what are you talking about, bro? And I was like, and he goes, so I'm doing it for me. And I go, yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And I was like, let's do it. Because I was like, he distilled all my crazy, like fantastical world building bullshit into just what am I doing as an actor? I'm taking this thing and I'm taking it for me.
What a lesson we got, front row, right?
Yeah,
and he was at the peak fame. Not that that matters, but it was like it created a certain energy around him for sure. Can I share a recent Franco anecdote?
Please,
I hope this gets to him somehow because I'm curious on his perspective, right? So this is last year, maybe at the end of 2021. I take my DP to lunch in Playa del Rey. And we go to this famous taco joint. It's like a big, kitschy, like Venice-y type place, if that paints a picture. $15 tacos, And
sure, of course,
they're amazing. And Nathan, my DP, fucking amazing guy. He's been on the podcast too. And we're talking and we're sort of getting to know each other and our histories. And somehow James comes up. And what I've noticed about people who've sort of been in the public crosshairs in not a good way, maybe, but it hasn't been proven, is that there's always a kind of quick, like, defense or is an easy way to pile on them without really knowing anything. And so I had noticed that, and I even noticed the feeling come up within myself because I didn't know what Nathan thought about James, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in this meeting trying to connect. And how do we connect on similar topics, right? So luckily, and my most honest truth, obviously, is like, I'm just like in praise of James professionally. I'm like, this dude hired me for like 3 years. He saw it in me. Were we close? No, but he knew my name and we acted and he seemed to appreciate me enough to bring me like to San Francisco to do my movie to UCLA. And this wasn't like a masturbatory like name dropping talk. It was in reference to our work, right? And for like 10 minutes, he and I, and like in the middle of this couple sits right next to us. So we're at this like communal bench and it's just us eating tacos. And then this beautiful couple sits next to me. And I remember we're in the middle of this and I'm like using his name too, James Franco. And I'm like, da, 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 da. And I look and I just saw the couple kind of like flicker their eyes, like the energy like flickered towards us. I was like, they're hearing what I'm saying, right? But in my mind's eye, I'm like, it's all positive, so it's all good. So I'm like in a 10-minute spiel about my time with James and how much he benefited me and like he really is an artist. And I shit you not, I'm facing the door. A guy walks in with a mask on, and I'm like, I mean, like I could touch him close. It's James Franco.
Dude, what?
And guess
That is
who he's
weird,
there?
bro.
Guess who he's there to meet?
Brian Lally.
The couple. No, the couple next to me has been fucking listening to every word I've said the whole time.
Wow,
right?
dude,
They've
that's
basically
crazy.
been there since. And like, honestly, just the way everything went down, it was COVID, masks. I didn't even like bother saying hi, right? Because I'm
Right.
just like, I was too shell shocked, one, and I didn't even. He's there for lunch. I try never to bother people, especially if they look like in it. And so, my DP couldn't see it, so I had to kind of wait till they like moseyed on, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
I think that was Franco. No, it was him. We walked around to the parking lot, and he was in the window with his mask off, and I was like, "It fucking was! It was him!" You know. And so it was a good reminder and lesson of like how small the town is and how small the world is.
That's just a weird,
like
weird
instant,
thing.
dude. Like
Yeah.
I'm still talking, and then he shows up, and I was like,
so fucking, and to recognize him with a mask too, man. That's
yeah, it was the eyes, you know. But
Yeah.
I know we're out of time here, so I wanna wrap up by saying this. I fucking love you so much. You're, I mean, truly a magical creator, man, and I love everything you do, like, and the fact that you're doing it, meaning like I want to see what Devin's writing, I want to see what Devin's directing, and I always want to see your acting, but none of that pales in comparison to the man you are, and you've worked really hard on yourself, and you deserve all of your feelings of love, happiness, security, and bliss. And so I'm glad to see you there, my friend, because we've been in the trenches together a long time, and you're a brother to me. So I love you, and thank you for your time today.
Well, that was extremely moving. Thank you, Sean. That's it's really sweet, man. I fucking love everything you said. I really is a good thing to hear from me today. So I appreciate that. And I feel the exact same way about you, man. I am in awe of you so many times that I'm not sure you fully understand, like, because the amount of work you do, the amount of scripts you write, the amount of stuff, and that doesn't give you value, but it just is inspiring to me. And yeah, I love you for that, man. And I meant what I said before. I was doing my best shit when I was with you, you know? So,
Dude, I'm open for business, baby. I love working with you. You know that. I bring you in on everything I can. Like, that's within my power. I always will. Always. Like,
yeah, I think you've been in
hang around set with Devin.
I think you've been in everything I've directed.
Yeah,
except for things you wouldn't have a part in because it's like me and one other person. But like,
sure.
I'm pretty sure you've been in all of my short films, obviously the feature, and probably the best sketch I've ever done. So,
yeah. Well, at least the most popular. I mean, you fucking killed that sketch. But one of my favorites is the WrestleMania sketch still to this day. And motherfucking, what's the one with Jeremy Lin? Oh my God, the one with Jeremy Lin.
The post-game interview. Yeah,
that's so good. I watch those on occasion and they bring me joy. But dude, I know I'm in business to do more sketches. I was just looking at doing another Chit Hauser. So
nice, man. Yeah, I mean, I think we were in talks to do it, and then life kind of caught up with us.
Yeah.
At the end of the last year, 2 years ago. But hey, let's talk. I'll have my people call your people.
Yeah, that's right.
The people will call the people.
People will call the people. And I'm going to stop the record and then we can say a quick goodbye.
Sure.